Arizona Territory, 1872. Golden dust floated through the high windows of Vale's general store, catching late afternoon light like flickering embers. Behind the polished oak counter stood Lura Vale, her slender fingers gliding over the leather-bound ledger as she tallied the day's says with methodical care. At just 20, Lura carried herself with a grace beyond her years. Her honey-blonde hair was neatly tucked beneath a plain bonnet, her back straight as a pine board, despite the weight of fatigue pressing against her shoulders. Lura, her father's deep voice, thundered from the storeroom. "Be sure those sacks of coffee and sugar are labeled proper before closing time." "Yes, sir," she answered calmly, her voice even dutiful. Corvin Vale emerged, wiping his hands on a flour-dusted apron. He was a hardened man, one who'd carved out his success supplying everything from pickaxes to preserves to miners, settlers, and cavalry posts alike. His presence filled the room, confident, unsentimental, carved by sun and survival. Wrinkles etched across his brow hinted at hard bargains and harder winters. "Captain Crow's coming for supper." His tone left no room for debate. He made Major, "You know, your mother's cooking up something special." Lura's pen paused. A bead of ink welled beneath the nib. Major Dastan Crow had been calling more often lately, each visit more pointed, more possessive. At 35, the Army man was known across the territory, especially for the way he'd handled the Apache issue. He was seen as a man of stature, a good match, stable, influential, everything a frontier girl was supposed to want. "I still have numbers to finish," she murmured, not looking up. Her father's hand landed firm on the counter. "They can wait. This is bigger Lura. World's changin' fast. Railroad's comin'. So is law and order. The right man at your side will make sure we've got a place in it." Before she could reply, the bell over the door jingled. The door swung open. 3 Apache men entered. Instantly, the store's air shifted. They stood tall in worn leathers and repurposed settler coats. Even in silence, their pride was palpable. Men pushed to trade here, but not bowed by it. Corvin's stance shifted too. That slick merchant smile slid into place. "Afternoon," he said curtly. "What can I help you with?" The eldest among them stepped forward. "We trade skins, need flour, coffee." His English was rough but understandable, his gaze steady. While her father struck up the terms, Lura's eyes were drawn to the youngest of the 3. He stood apart, taller, stiller. His eyes locked on hers, dark as coal sharp with something she couldn't name. His hair fell long past his shoulders, one eagle feather tied at the temple. A thin scar marked his jawline, catching the store's lamplight. But it was those eyes, so quietly fierce, that unsettled her. For a fleeting heartbeat, the world narrowed to just their gaze across the shelves of beans and gun oil. "Lura," her father snapped. "Get 2 sacks of flour from the back." She broke eye contact, hurried toward the storeroom, pulse stammering in her throat. She could still feel his eyes on her as she reached the canvas bags with unsteady fingers. When she returned, the young Apache man was studying a silver pocket watch that hung behind the counter. "You like that watch?" The words slipped out before she could catch them. He looked up, surprise flashing across his face, perhaps not expecting her to speak. "It marks white man's time," he said, voice deep and smoother than she'd imagined. "My people read time by sun, moon, and seasons." But still, she said, setting the flour on the counter, "You seem curious." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I am curious. About many things." Vecto the elder barked in Apache. "Enough." The young man, Vecto, stepped back, but his gaze never left Lura's face. There was something in it. A question, a warning, maybe even a promise. When the men were gone, Corvin turned the key in the door with a long sigh. "White River bunch," he muttered. "Some of them still scout for the army. The rest, well, they're the last halfway decent ones." "They didn't seem dangerous," Lura said softly. "Peaceful for now," her father said. "But don't forget the Sanders family. 3 months back. Scalped. every last one. He leaned close, eyes hard. You can dress a wolf in a collar, Lura. Doesn't mean he won't bite. That evening at supper, Major Crow droned on about new rail lines, military posts, and taming the frontier. But Lura wasn't listening. Her thoughts were far from the polished crystal and roast venison. She was thinking of a scar traced across bronze skin and a voice that measured time not by clocks, but by the stars. On this particular morning, Lura Vale had ridden, farther than usual, following the creek into the foothills where tall cottonwoods threw long, blessed shadows across the water. She dismounted, letting her mare drink while she settled onto a sun-warmed rock, lifting off her bonnet so the breeze could cool the back of her neck. You ride a long way from town, alone. The voice struck her like a shot. Lura jerked, nearly sliding off the rock. Across the narrow creek stood Vecto, holding the reins of a paint horse. He wore buckskin leggings and a faded blue scout shirt open at the throat. A rifle hung across his back, but his hands were empty, relaxed, not threatening. You startled me, she managed, breath catching as she hurriedly tied her bonnet back beneath her chin. That was not my aim, he said calmly, not moving from his side of the creek. The water between them felt like a drawn line neither wished to cross. Were you following me? She asked, mustering her nerve. A flicker of amusement broke across his face. I was here first. This is where I come when I want to be alone. Oh, she murmured, heat rushing to her cheeks. Then I should go. No. The word came quick, firm, almost urgent. The shade and the water belonged to no man. Silence drifted in, stretching and settling around them. Lura found herself studying him openly now, the alert way he stood, proud, yet guarded like a hawk watching from a high ridge. You're the storekeeper's daughter, he said at last. She nodded. Lura Vale. Lura, he repeated, shaping the name as if it carried weight. I am Vecto. It means strong in my people's tongue. His brow dipped slightly. Are you strong? The question left her before she could judge it improper. He grew solemn. I have survived. In these times, that is strength enough. She couldn't argue with that. Are you truly a scout for the army? She asked, recalling Corvin Vale's harsh warnings. When it serves my people, he said. His jaw tightened. The reservation is hard. Food runs thin. Medicine runs thinner. By leading the bluecoats after the renegades, I earn rations for the old ones. And the children. You don't sound proud of it. Should a man feel pride, he asked quietly, when he must hunt his own brothers just to feed his mother? The bitterness in his voice cut deep. Lura lowered her gaze, suddenly ashamed of her fine riding dress and the comfort of a life that had never demanded impossible choices. I'm sorry, she whispered. That was thoughtless. Surprise flickered in his eyes. After a long moment, Vecto stepped down into the shallow creek crossing, with water swirling around his ankles. Up close, she could see flecks of amber, hidden in his dark eyes, the sharp line of the scar along his jaw. Why do you ride alone? He asked. It isn't safe. It's the only time I feel free, she admitted, surprising even herself. A quiet understanding rippled between them, two souls bound by different worlds but held captive in their own ways. Different cages, same confinement. I should head back, she said, standing and reaching for her mare's reins. They'll wonder where I've gone. Vecto nodded, but as she mounted, he spoke again. I will be here tomorrow, after sunrise. It wasn't a question, not quite an invitation either, just a statement, solid and quietly hopeful. Lura hesitated, knowing the sensible response, the expected one. I ride every morning, she said softly. Then she turned her horse toward town. As she rode away, she felt his eyes on her back, and something warm and dangerous uncurled inside her chest. Something that felt too close to hope. Through the burning heat of July and into August, the mornings became theirs. Lura slipped away with the first light, her excuses to her parents growing more creative each day. Vecto was always waiting, sometimes with fresh trout, sometimes with berries, sometimes with nothing at all except stories of his people, or quiet questions about the world beyond the territory. They were cautious, painfully cautious, never touching, keeping a respectful distance, speaking only of safe things at first. The weather, the horses, the shifting land around them. But day by day, that invisible boundary began to lean, then blur. "Why do you always wear that?" Vecto asked one morning, motioning toward her bonnet as they sat beneath a sprawling cottonwood. Lura touched the ribbons beneath her chin. "It's proper. Ladies aren't meant to show their hair in public." "The sun has never seen your hair?" he asked, genuinely confused. She laughed, a sound that rose easier around him every day. "Of course it has. Just not often. And never when gentlemen are around." "I am no gentleman?" he said with a crooked smile. "No," she replied, matching his tone. "You certainly are not." There was no insult in it, only truth. After a moment's hesitation, Lura untied the ribbons and slipped off her bonnet. Her honey blonde hair was pinned neatly, though a few loose strands framed her face in the soft morning light. Vecto's expression shifted, deepened. "Like corn silk," he said quietly. "Beautiful." The compliment lingered between them, quiet, yet powerful in its truth. Lura felt warmth creep into her cheeks, but didn't reach for the bonnet again. "Tell me about your mother," she said, shifting the conversation gently. His gaze turned distant. "She was a healer, knew the plants, the prayers. She passed 3 winters ago, the coughing sickness. Came with the traders." "I'm sorry," Lura whispered, and she meant it. "And your father, Mexican soldiers, killed him when I was just a boy." Vecto said, voice tinged with old sorrow but not self-pity. "He taught me to track, to hunt, to stand for our people." "Would he approve of you speaking with me?" she asked hesitantly. He paused. "He would say a warrior must understand both enemy and friend. Learn the ways of those who steal our land. Is that what I am to you, a lesson? A way to study your enemy?" The sting in her voice surprised her. At first, perhaps. His honesty didn't flinch. But now, "I don't know what you are to me, Lura Vale. Only that every morning I wait to see your horse, and it has nothing to do with enemies." The words shifted the air between them, something fragile and new taking root. Lura glanced down at her hands, the faint calluses forming. Despite her father's constant insistence, she wear gloves in the shop. "Dastan Crow has asked my father for permission to court me," she blurted. "He speaks of marriage before winter." Vecto stilled. "The same soldier who torched Black Mountain, who burned 3 villages. I don't know what he's done," she said honestly. "I only know what my father sees. Security, reputation, a proper match." "And what do you see? A cage with golden bars is still a cage," she replied. She looked him square in the eyes. "I see a life where each day repeats itself, where I'm cherished only for silence and manners, where I must silence the voice inside me." "What does that voice say?" His voice dropped lower, intimate. She turned to the mountains. "It speaks of dangerous things, impossible things." Vecto moved, kneeling in front of her. He didn't touch her, but the heat of him reached her, the scent of sage and pine pulling her closer. "Nothing is impossible," he said fiercely. "My people have survived bullets, plague, betrayal. They say we'll vanish like mist. Yet we remain." "This is different," she murmured. Is it his eyes held hers? "Tell me you feel nothing when you come here and I'll never speak of it again." Lura knew the proper answer, the safe one, but when she opened her mouth, different words came. "I feel everything," she confessed, "and it scares me." Gently, Vecto reached for her hand. His touch was rough, warm. It was just a touch, but lightning rushed through her. "It scares me too," he said. "What lies between us can only lead to danger. Then why risk it?" she asked, but didn't pull away. "Because some hungers defy reason." His thumb circled her wrist slowly. "Because I've seen too much death to fear anything more than a life unlived." His words sank into her bones. Lura had grown up with rules, warnings, and well-worn paths. But with her hand in his, she felt truly alive for the first time. A gunshot echoed across the hills. Vecto sprang to his feet, alert. He waited, listening. "Hunt us," he said, after a beat, relaxing. Still, a reminder. The world doesn't wait for us. Lura stood, brushing dust from her skirt. "I should go. If I'm late again, they'll start asking questions." Vecto nodded, but caught her hand again as she turned. Tomorrow. It wasn't about the ride anymore. It was a question of destiny. Tomorrow, she said, and it felt like leaping into the unknown. The Crow family estate stood grand in Willow Creek, 2 stories tall, real glass windows, and a porch wrapping 3 sides. As Lura sat in the parlor beside her mother, Irelda, listening to Dastan Crow talk politics with her father, Corvan, she felt detached, like a ghost watching her own life. "The Apache problem will be solved within 2 years, the major said, swirling his brandy. "General Crook has a new approach. The hostiles will be either pacified or removed. The rest will be civilized on the reservations." "Excellent news." Corvan nodded. "Can't have savages in the hills. Bad for trade, bad for growth." "Exactly," the major said, turning to Lura with a polished smile full of perfect teeth. At 35, he had the sharp, commanding look of a military man, his uniform spotless, his back straight even when at rest. "Miss Vale, I was hoping you might join me for the Founders' Day festivities next weekend. There'll be music. Dancing?" Lura felt her mother's watchful eyes urging her forward. "That's very kind, Major, but "She'd be delighted," Irelda cut in, her voice sweet and smooth. "Wouldn't you, dear?" Cornered Lura forced a smile. "Of course." The Major's pleasure was unmistakable. "Splendid. I went ahead and ordered some sheet music from back east. Perhaps you'd grace us with a piece after dinner. I hear you're quite gifted on the piano." As the evening wore on, Lura played her role to perfection. Dutiful daughter, potential bride, the quiet prize in a negotiation where everyone seemed to understand her worth, except maybe her. Her hands floated over the piano keys without thought, while her mind drifted to a quiet creek bank, to rough hands and to words whispered with an honesty that cut through every lie. Later, as the Major prepared to leave, he caught her alone in the hall. "You seem far away tonight, Miss Vale," he said, his eyes keen and searching. "I trust I haven't caused offense." "Not at all, Major," she answered. Her gaze lowered just enough. "It's just the heat, I suppose. Makes a body feel faint." He stepped closer, tall enough that she had to lift her chin to meet his face. "I've spoken to your father about my intentions," he said. "He's receptive." A chill surged through her. "Sir, I no need to get into it now," he said, raising one hand. "These things follow proper steps. I simply wanted you to know I see in you what a soldier needs in a wife. Grace, obedience, refinement." He paused, eyes narrowing slightly. "You do well in Washington when my next posting comes." "Washington," she echoed, barely audible. "Naturally, a man with my record won't stay in this dusty corner of the world for long." His smile was thin, distant. "You'd have a grand home, staff, status, everything a woman could dream of. Everything except freedom," she thought. Everything except her own say. "You honor me, Major," she managed, though the words felt like dry ashes on her tongue. He nodded, pleased, and lifted her hand. His fingers were cool, precise, not at all like the warmth she'd felt that morning. When he brushed his lips across her knuckles, it took every ounce of control not to jerk her hand away. "Until the celebration," he said, boots clicking crisply against the wood as he departed. Her mother swept in from the parlor, glowing with pride. "Well done, Lura. Did you see the way he looked at you? By Christmas, you might be engaged to the most eligible man in the territory." Lura didn't answer. Her hand still tingled cold from his touch. In the quiet of her heart, she made a choice, one that would send her family into fits if they ever found out. Tomorrow she'd return to the creek, and this time she wouldn't lie to herself about what Vecto meant to her. Some things were worth the cost, even if that cost was everything she'd ever known. The next 2 weeks swept by in a haze of hidden meetings and building tension. Each dawn, Lura would slip away to where Vecto waited beneath the cottonwoods. Each day, their bond grew stronger. Words became touches, his hand brushing her hair, hers tracing the scar along his jawline. Their palms pressed together in the dappled light. They dreamed impossible dreams of a world where skin color didn't brand you, where their peoples no longer bled from ancient wounds, where they could simply be together beneath the vast Arizona sky. Vecto taught her his words for dawn, for eagle, for that still hush right before the rain comes. She taught him to read, using a slim poetry book she'd snuck from Corvin Vale's study. It was foolish, reckless, and more real than anything she'd ever known. Meanwhile, trouble brewed in town. The talk of Apache attacks got louder. Settlers whispered about scorched homesteads, stolen cattle wagons, ambushed on lonely trails. The army thickened its presence. Patrols now rode daily. Major Destin Crow was often at their home, his courtship now an open affair, though his conversation grew darker with each visit, obsessed with the Apache situation. One blistering August afternoon, Lura was in the store arranging canned peaches while her father checked the month's accounts. The door slammed open. A dust-covered rider stumbled inside. "Attack at the Henderson Ranch," the man gasped. "They're all dead." "Man, wife, kids, Apache by the look of it." "Apache." Corvin Vale straightened, face hardening. "When last night, most likely. Found 'em this morning after they missed the lumber run." The rider wiped sweat from his neck. Major Crow's gathering men. "Says it's time to end this once and for all." A cold sickness curled in Lura's stomach. The Hendersons lived just 10 miles north. A sweet family. 3 young children who'd often stop by for sugar sticks and canned milk. "I'm getting my rifle," her father said, already heading for the stairs. "Wait," Father Lura called after him. "Shouldn't we wait? Let the army check, be sure it was really the Apache." He turned, his jaw clenched. 5 white settlers are dead, daughter. Who else could it be?" His gaze sharpened, studying her face with a flicker of doubt. "Why would you question this?" Lura's voice faltered her words, stumbling over a knot of doubt. "I only meant it feels reckless to accuse without knowing the truth." "Your sympathy for murderers is troubling," Corvin Vale replied coldly. "Stay with your mother. Lock the doors once I leave." Within the hour, a company of 30 men had gathered in the dusty town square, soldiers, ranchers, and shopkeepers, all armed and mounted. At their head, Destin Crow sat tall in the saddle, his uniform untouched by the heat and grit. As the group prepared to ride out, Crow turned his steed toward the general store where Lura Vale stood framed in the doorway. "Don't worry, Miss Vale," he said with a sharp-clipped smile. "We'll see to your safety. By morning there'll be fewer Apache to concern decent folks." Lura steadied her voice. "Which band do you think did this?" "Does it matter?" He tugged on his gloves. "But if you must know, we believe a group from the White Mountain Reservation has gone rogue. Scouts tracked them to the canyons east of here. White Mountain, Vecto's people." Her fingers clenched the wooden frame so tightly, her knuckles blanched. "Surely not all of them." Crow's smile thinned into something cruel. "When vermin infest a house, Miss Vale, you don't stop to ask which rat chewed the grain. You fumigate the whole damn place." The men rode out with wild yells and rifle shots cracking in the air. Lura stepped back into the store, heart pounding like a war drum. She had to warn Vecto. She had to reach him before Crow and his men did. But how? She couldn't just ride out now, not with the whole town wound tight like a trap. The night dragged on like molasses. She moved through the evening like a ghost, helping Arelda prepare a quiet supper, washing the dishes, murmuring an excuse about a headache before slipping into her room. There she changed into her riding clothes and waited by the window watching house lights wink out one by one. Just past midnight, once even the saloon had gone still, she crept down the back stairs and into the stable behind the store. Her mare nickered softly, sensing her presence. With shaking hands, Lura saddled the horse under the watch of the half-moon stars, sprinkled across the sky like dust. She rode hard faster than sense allowed along the creek toward the hills. The trail to their hidden meeting place felt strange under moonlight, cloaked in eerie shadows and lurking dangers. When she finally reached the cottonwood grove, she dismounted her knees, trembling. "Vecto," she whispered, voice barely louder than the creek's murmuring flow. "Vecto, are you here?" Only silence met her. Her hope wavered. Foolish girl, thinking he'd be waiting here in the dead of night. Then from the shadows a shape moved. He emerged as if born from the darkness, sudden and saddened. Relief swelled in her chest, followed swiftly by dread. "What are you doing here?" he asked, tension coiling in every word. "It's dangerous." "I had to warn you," she said, moving closer. "There was an attack at the Henderson Ranch. Everyone's dead. Crow's leading a group of armed men. They say it was your people." His face went hard as flint. "The Hendersons are dead." "Yes." "Was it your townsfolk?" "No," he said with conviction. "We've stayed on the reservation. The ones who left went north, far from here." His brow furrowed. "When did this attack happen? Last night, they think." "Impossible," he muttered. "I was with the agent till sundown yesterday, discussing rations. No one could have made that distance unnoticed." He seized her arm. "Lura, this doesn't make sense. Something else is at play." She believed him completely. "Then who did it?" "I don't know. But Crow's been waiting for a reason to strike. That reservation has water his friends want." He turned away, pacing like a wolf on edge. "I have to go back. Warn the others. The women and children, if soldiers come, they'll be sitting ducks." "I'll come with you," Lura blurted. Vecto stopped in his tracks, staring. "You can't. You need to stay with your family. My place is with you." She said the truth of it, anchoring deep inside her. "I can help. I can speak to Crow. Make him see reason." He shook his head. "He won't listen to a woman. And if they see you with me, they'll call you a traitor. Or worse." She knew he was right. But the thought of doing nothing while blood was spilled clawed at her. "Then let me ride part way," she begged. "I'll stay hidden. I can't go back and pretend everything's fine while they hunt down your people." Vecto studied Lura's face under the silver glow of the moon, conflict etched deep in his expression. After a long beat, he gave a sharp nod. "We ride. Now. Quiet and fast." They moved through the night like whispers on the wind, following dry washes and game trails Lura would never have found on her own. Vecto rode ahead occasionally, circling back, his movements smooth and sure, despite the darkness. They said little, conserving breath and focus. But twice he reached out to steady her when the terrain grew rough, his touch a firm anchor in the dizzying dark. As the first pale light of dawn crept over the ridge, they crested a rise overlooking a quiet valley. Smoke curled up from simple dwellings, the reservation. But something was wrong. The smoke was too heavy, too black. Vecto stiffened. "Fire," he muttered, hollow. "The settlement's burning." Without another word, he drove his horse down the slope, reckless and fast. Lura followed at a safer pace, her heart hammering against her ribs. The closer they got, the clearer the horror became. Homes ablaze, people running in blind panic, gunshots splitting the morning air. Vecto reined in, throwing out an arm. "Stay here. Stay hidden. If you care about my life, stay hidden." His eyes locked with hers, fierce and desperate. She nodded, slipping into a patch of scrub oak. Vecto galloped into the flames and chaos. Lura watched, helpless heart clenched in her throat. Soldiers in uniform fired at anything that moved. Screams, smoke, gunfire, it was a nightmare come alive. Then a rustle to her right. 3 riders approached, taking the same path she and Vecto had taken. Her blood froze. At the front rode her father, Corvin Vale rifle, resting across his saddle. Flanking him were 2 townsmen, Bragg and Thad. She ducked low, but it was too late. He spotted her mare. Lura. His voice rang clear in the air, turning from disbelief to fury. What in God's name are you doing here? He dismounted, marching toward her hiding place. The others trailed, wary. Father, please, she said, stepping from concealment. This is wrong. They're killing women and children. The Apache didn't attack the Hendersons. So you've betrayed us, his voice rose, face dark with rage. You warned them before they got the justice they deserve. His eyes scanned her clothes, her windswept look. Realization dawned. How long? How long have you been sneaking out to see them? It's not what you think, she said quickly. Isn't it? He seized her arm. I knew you were changing the questions, the looks, but this... He pointed toward the burning valley. This is betrayal, Sir Bragg called, pointing. Someone's riding in. Lura turned. Vecto was charging toward them. No, she screamed. Vecto, go back. Her father's grip tightened. You know his name, his face twisted with disgust. Dear God. Tell me you haven't. A shot rang out. One of the men fired. Lura lunged, throwing off his aim. The bullet missed, but Vecto saw and veered, diving into a nearby ravine. Damn it, girl, the man snarled, shoving her aside. He was right there. Her father looked at her like she was a stranger. Get her on her horse, he barked. Take her to town. Lock her in her room until I return. Father, please listen, she begged. This is murder. The Apache didn't do it. Enough. Corvin roared. You've disgraced yourself and our name. When this ends, you'll marry Dastan Crow and you'll leave this place behind. I won't, she said, voice trembling but firm. I won't marry a man who slaughters innocents. His hand struck her. The slap cracked through the silence, shocking them both. He had never hit her before. For a long moment they just stared at one another, 2 people who no longer knew each other. Take her, he said, finally, voice cold, and make sure she doesn't escape again. As the men forced her onto the saddle, Lura caught a flicker of motion on the ridge, one lone figure standing still against the fading sky. Too far to help. Too close to unsee her humiliation. Vecto. Their eyes locked across that impossible stretch of earth, a silent vow passing between them, like smoke from a dying fire. And then he was gone, swallowed by the dusk, while Lura was led away from fire and screams, away from the man who had stirred her heart, toward a future that smelled more like death than hope. 3 weeks crawled by in a fog of captivity. Lura was kept under constant surveillance. Her door locked tight each night, her steps confined to the general store and the home above it. Her mother Irelda shifted between weepy guilt trips and frantic preparations for a rushed wedding. Her father Corvin barely said a word, and somehow that silence stung more than 1,000 curses. The papers across the territory called it a triumph, the raid on the Apache camp. The headlines praised Major Dastan Crow for his swift justice against renegades accused of butchering settlers. 27 Apache dead, they claimed. Survivors scattered to the high rocks or shoved onto far-off reservations. No mention of the women, no mention of the children, but Lura knew. She had seen the truth with her own eyes. And as for Vecto, there was nothing. No word. In the nights locked in her room with only guilt and grief, for warmth she feared he'd died in the blaze. But something deep within her bones told her he hadn't. It was like a beat inside her chest that defied logic, a knowing. He was out there, somewhere, and maybe, just maybe, he thought of her too. The wedding was marked for October 12th, just weeks away. Major Crow, now parading as colonel, visited twice a week, talking of their grand future in Washington with cold detachment. He rarely looked her in the eye. Maybe he suspected her secret. If he did, his behavior showed it less like a suitor, more like a man sealing a deal. Then on a crisp September evening, as Lura helped close the store, Corvin finally broke his silence. "The fitting's tomorrow," he said, locking the cash drawer with a snap. "Your mother arranged it with Silda." Lura didn't look up from the ledger. Her grip on the pen tightened. "I'm not going." His shoulders stiffened. "This isn't up for debate. Everything's been arranged. I can't marry him." The words came out like boulders dragged from a deep riverbed. Heavy. Inevitable. "You will." He turned toward her, eyes like stone. "Colonel Crow has overlooked your indiscretion. Most men wouldn't forgive a woman who tangled with savages." "That what you think I did?" she asked quietly, finally meeting his stare. "I don't know what you did," he muttered. Pain, just a flicker, passed through his features. "And I don't want to know. But I saw enough that day to understand you've kept dangerous company. The Colonel offers you respectability. A clean slate far from here. He offers me a cage," she whispered, "and his hands are drenched in innocent blood." He slammed the ledger shut. "Enough. This land's not for bleeding hearts. The Apache have murdered hundreds, and how many have we murdered?" She shot back, rising suddenly. "Their children. Their elders. The Hendersons weren't killed by Apache. Vecto told me everything. The tracks, the timing. It was all a setup for the attack." He froze. The name hung between them like smoke. "You speak his name like—" He choked on the words. "Like I love him," she said. "I do." Silence. Color drained from Corvin's face. "You've lost your damn mind," he rasped. "To even feel that I haven't lost anything. For once I see things clear." She inhaled deep, steady, solid. "I won't marry Colonel Crow. Not next month. Not ever." Corvin stared at her, as if he no longer recognized his own child. Maybe he didn't. The girl who played piano for guests, who folded linens without complaint, who obeyed every rule, she'd disappeared, somewhere along the creek under the cottonwoods. "You have no choice," he said finally, his voice dull and final. "Invitations are out. Plans are made. Your reputation, our standing, it all rides on this wedding. There's always a choice." Lura replied, thinking of Vecto's quiet words about survival, even when every path seems closed. Corvin's jaw clenched. "You're confined to your room until the wedding." He took her arm and led her up the back steps. "I hoped you'd come to your senses, but clearly stricter measures are needed." As the door shut behind her, Lura stood still, calm, washing over her like twilight. Let them lock her body away. Her heart had already chosen its escape. The wedding dress hung like a shroud in the corner of her room, ivory silk imported at great cost, its modest train and lace trim whispering of a future she didn't want. Lura Vale moved quietly through the confines of her space, never letting her eyes linger on the dress. She read the same few books over and over, stared at the changing light outside her locked window, too narrow to escape through. Every day, her mother Irelda came in with meals and desperate appeals. "You'll come to care for him," she said one afternoon, gently arranging a vase of flowers on the table. Bright colors meant to disguise a cell. "I didn't love your father at first either. It grew. With time and children." Lura's voice was calm, no longer combative. "This isn't the same. Because he's older. Plenty of girls marry men of standing. It's respectable." "No," Lura said, turning from the window. "Because his hands are stained with blood, spilled for ambition, not survival. And because my heart already belongs to someone else." Irelda's fingers trembled as she fussed with the flower stems. "This infatuation with a savage. His name is Vecto," Lura said, voice low but firm. "And he has more honor in one breath than Dastan Crow will ever hold in his whole life." "Honor doesn't keep you warm in winter," her mother snapped, losing the last threads of patience. "Honor won't silence the whispers when you disgrace this family. Do you think any decent man will take you after this scandal?" "I don't want a decent man." Lura looked her mother square in the eyes. "I want someone brave, someone who sees me as more than property." Irelda left in tears again like every day that week. That night, as the house fell quiet and the shadows deepened, Lura sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the locked door. 6 days until the wedding. 6 days until she'd be bound to a man whose touch made her skin crawl, whose medals were won on the backs of innocents. Then came a soft tap at the window. At first she thought it was a branch in the breeze, but then came another, deliberate, rhythmic. Her heart leapt as she crossed the room, pressing her face to the glass. A figure emerged from the darkness just barely lit by the moon. A pebble struck the pane with precision. With trembling hands, Lura slid open the window as far as the frame allowed, not enough to slip through, but enough to see, and be seen. "Who's there?" she whispered, though deep down she already knew. A shadow stepped forward. Vecto. He looked thinner than before. A scar now marked his temple, but his eyes, they hadn't changed. They still held that quiet fire that once ignited something deep inside her. "You're alive," she whispered, a flood of joy and fear rising in her throat. "I told you I'd come back," he answered plainly, as if crossing a territory full of soldiers and spies was nothing but routine. "How did you find me? I've been watching this town for days," he said. "Heard enough at the saloon to know about the wedding." Lura gripped the windowsill. "I'm not going through with it, but they've locked me in, guarded me. Then we go tonight." His certainty sent a chill through her bones. "I've got horses hidden in the brush. Supplies ready. We'll ride south past the border, into the mountains where my mother's kin live. The army can't reach that far." He stepped closer, his voice barely a whisper now. "It won't be easy. Not the life you've known." She looked at him without flinching. "That life is already gone." Vecto nodded, no more words needed. "Can you climb down?" She eyed the frame the distance. The window was too tight, the drop too far. "No. The door's locked from the outside. Ever since I tried to run last week." A flicker of frustration crossed his face. He scanned the building in silence. "Tomorrow night," he said, "I'll come back. With help. Be ready. Only take what you can carry on horseback." "The store," she whispered. "There's a back entrance less visible. My father keeps the front keys near his bed, but there's a loading door that only locks from inside." Vecto's eyes gleamed with approval. "How do I get to you?" "I don't know," she admitted. "They only let me downstairs for meals, and I'm always watched." She pressed her forehead against the wooden frame, thinking, searching. "Wait. Tomorrow is Sunday. They'll take me to church. It's the only time I leave the house. Maybe then." "Too many eyes during the service," Vecto warned. "But after, when everyone's talking outside, that's when no one's paying attention." Plans took shape murmured beneath the moonlight. Whispered dreams wrapped in danger. When every last detail had been covered, every risk considered, Vecto reached up toward her window and she reached back. The distance between them was too far to touch, but Lura still stretched out her hand, aching to close the inches that felt like miles. "Until tomorrow," Vecto said, his gaze holding more than promises. It held her whole world. "Until tomorrow," she whispered back, watching as he faded into the night, taking her heart with him. Sunday arrived with a sky scrubbed clean, the autumn air sharp and filled with hidden hope. Lura dressed slowly in her finest church outfit, a sober blue dress with a high neck and full sleeves. She pinned her hair up tight, wearing the look expected of a bride-to-be. When Irelda came to unlock her door, she found Lura sitting quietly, Bible in hand. "You look brighter today," her mother said, in her tone cautious. "I've been thinking." Lura answered her words, vague enough not to be a lie. "Prayer has helped me see things clearer." Relief softened Irelda's tense features. "Your father will be glad to hear that. Colonel Crow will be attending church today." "Of course he will," Lura murmured, keeping her disgust hidden behind lowered lashes. The walk to the chapel was her first taste of fresh air in weeks. She breathed it in deeply, eyes drinking the shifting gold of the cottonwoods. the bustling preparations for winter all around town. Corvin Vale walked beside her, stiff and silent, while Irelda filled the air with anxious wedding chatter. The small whitewashed church stood at the northern end of Willow Creek, glowing in the morning sun. As they approached, Lura's feet slowed. Colonel Dastan Crow waited at the entrance, polished and sharp in his uniform, offering charm to each person with his well-practiced smile. When he saw her, that smile twitched, tightening just a little. "Miss Vale," he said, taking her gloved hand with his cold grip. "A pleasure to see you looking well. I trust the wedding is moving forward smoothly." "Everything is on track, Colonel," her father answered before she could. "Lura has had time to reflect on her duties." The colonel didn't look away from her. "Good. Perhaps after the service we can take a walk. There are details to discuss about our future home." She forced a smile, wearing the mask one last time. "That sounds lovely." Inside, the chapel brimmed with townsfolk dressed in their Sunday best. Lura followed her parents to their usual pew near the front, feeling the eyes, hearing the soft whispers. Her link to a so-called savage had been hushed up, but gossip always found a way in small towns. As hymns rose and sermons droned, Lura sat still, letting it all pass through her. Her mind was fixed on escape. The sun spilled through the windows. She tracked it carefully, counting every minute until the noon bells. When the final hymn faded, and folks started drifting outside, Lura leaned toward her mother. "I feel faint," she whispered. "The heat, maybe. Can I stay inside while you talk to Silda about the flowers?" Irelda's face folded with concern. "Of course, darling. I'll let the colonel know you're not feeling well." "Thank you," Lura said, pressing her mother's hand. That lie stung more than she expected. For all their differences, her mother had loved her, just not in a way that saw her clearly. As the chapel emptied, Lura remained seated, head bowed like in deep prayer. Through the windows, she saw her parents chatting with Colonel Crow and other townsfolk. Perfect, just as they had planned. With quiet resolve, she slipped from the pew and out the side door that led to the garden. No one noticed. Everyone's attention stayed fixed on the church front. Outside, she clung to the building's shadow, circling toward the alley at the back. There, just as promised, Vecto waited already, mounted on his paint horse, holding the reins of a second steed, a solid bay mare, saddled and packed for travel. His face was unreadable as she ran to him, but his eyes, those eyes shone with pride. "Quickly," he said, offering his hand. Lura grabbed her skirts and climbed up behind him, legs straddling the saddle in a way she never would have dared back home. Her dress rode scandalously high above her boots. Vecto handed her the reins to the supply-laden bay. "We ride for the creek first," he said, "then south. The foothills have scouts, they'll guide us across." She nodded, too focused to speak. He led them through back lanes, avoiding the main street, still filled with post-service chatter. They had nearly reached the town's edge when a voice split the air behind them. "There, it's her!" Lura turned just in time to see Thad, one of her father's store hands, pointing at them with disbelief and fury. The warning would reach the church any second, her parents, the colonel. The chase had begun. They mounted fast, leaving behind the hidden spring and plunging into the rugged stretch ahead. Vecto led the way, steering them deeper into the canyon where a narrow game trail snaked between high stone walls. The terrain slowed them down, forced them into single file. But the rock offered cover from any eyes watching from above. They rode for hours, the echoes playing tricks. Sometimes the noise of pursuit faded. Sometimes it returned, bouncing off the stone like ghosts. By midday, the heat bore down hard. The sun turned the canyon into an oven, the air rippling with heat waves. The horses were struggling, their sides foamed with sweat. There, Vecto pointed to a break ahead, a narrow notch cut into the eastern wall. "That leads up. If we keep pace, we can make the pines before nightfall." Just as they neared the spot, a rifle cracked loud, sharp, deadly. A bullet slammed into the rocks near Lura Vale's head. She ducked her mare, rearing in fright. Into the rocks Vecto barked already, leaping down and drawing his rifle from the scabbard. They slid behind a fallen boulder, tying the horses in a shallow ditch. From their vantage point, they spotted shadows moving at the canyon's edge, men on horseback using cover, just like they were. 4 soldiers, Vecto muttered, counting low. And 2 more. Your father, the colonel. Lura's stomach turned to ice. Of course, Corvin Vale would come. And Dastan Crow, he would never give up something he thought belonged to him. What do we do? She asked, steadying her breath. Vecto checked his rifle face grim. Not much ammo. They'll have plenty. He glanced toward the notch. If we can reach that trail, there's still hope. My brothers are waiting in the trees beyond. Then we go, Lura said, her voice firm. It's open ground. They'll have clear shots. We don't have another option. Vecto looked hard at her, searching for doubt. He found none. With a nod, he said, I'll draw their fire. When I yell, run to the horses. Mount up. Head straight for the trail. Don't stop. Don't turn around. I won't leave you, she said quickly. You have to. His fingers gripped hers, strong and sure. Trust me, Lura. I'll be right behind you. Before she could object, he broke from cover, firing a shot that sent the enemy ducking. The canyon erupted with gunfire, bullets ricocheting off stone. He fired again, then shouted, Now go! Lura dashed low to the ground, heart slamming in her chest. She reached the horses, freed them fast, and swung onto her mare. Grabbing the reins of Vecto's paint, she charged toward the notch. The gunfire echoed all around, but she kept her eyes forward. The trail loomed steep, narrow, their way out. She reached the first switchback when a voice split the canyon. Lura, stop this madness. Her father stood below rifle, lowered face torn between pain and rage. Beside him, Colonel Crow raised a pistol, aiming not at her, but behind her. She turned in the saddle. Vecto was sprinting across the exposed rock, almost to the base of the trail. Time slowed. She saw the steel in Vecto's jaw, the hatred gleaming in the colonel's eyes, and the silent war waging on her father's face. No, she cried just as the colonel fired. But Corvin struck his arm upward. The shot went wide, exploding harmlessly into the canyon wall. Crow cursed and tried again, but the hesitation had cost him. Vecto reached the trail. He scrambled upward, chest heaving, but eyes locked on hers. Go! He called, nearly breathless. I'm right behind. Lura turned her horse uphill, pulling Vecto's mount along. Behind her, shouts rang out. Corvin and Crow, arguing soldiers frozen without orders. That moment of chaos was all they needed. Vecto caught up to her at a broader bend in the trail, swung onto his paint horse in one smooth motion. His face was streaked with dust and sweat, but his eyes glowed with something fierce and bright. Your father, he said, still shocked. He stopped the shot. He did, Lura replied, stunned. I don't know why. Maybe he loves you more than he hates your choice. His voice softened just for a moment, but urgency returned quickly. They'll come after us. We have to make the trees before night. They kept riding higher and higher as the sun slipped west. The higher they climbed, the cooler the air became, the dry brush giving way to scattered juniper. Then finally to the first tall pines standing like silent sentries. From time to time, Lura glanced behind them, spotting distant figures, riders still on their trail, too far to be in immediate danger, but too stubborn to give up. By the time the sun dipped low in the western sky, they reached a ridge and slipped beneath the thick canopy of pine trees. It stretched endlessly toward the shadowy mountains in the distance. Vecto moved like he was coming home, his senses sharper steps, more confident ears tuned to the whispers of the forest. We're close, he murmured as twilight deepened around them. My brothers will be near. Almost as if summoned, 2 men stepped out from the shadows. Apache warriors, rifles in hand, their movements silent and sure, just like Vecto. They spoke quickly in their own tongue, the words too swift for Lura to follow, despite all Vecto had tried to teach her. One gestured them forward, taking point on an invisible trail that weaved through the dark woods. The other melted back into the night behind them. Where's he going? Lura asked quietly. To erase our tracks, Vecto replied. He'll lead them in circles till they lose our scent. All night they rode, stopping only to rest the horses and chew on strips of dried meat and wild berries. At dawn they crossed a high pass and began the descent into a valley Vecto promised lay just a day from the Mexican border. Golden light spilled through the pine needles as Lura studied the man riding beside her. He'd changed. His face bore new lines and weariness lingered in his eyes, but the core of him remained unshaken. Strength, honor, a steady will that hadn't wavered even when the world did. "What are you thinking?" he asked, catching her watching him. "That I'd follow you anywhere," she said simply. A quiet smile softened his expression. "Even toward an uncertain road, especially that one." She smiled back. "The uncertain path is the only one worth taking." That night they camped in a hollow beside a still, glassy lake. Their Apache guide vanished again to scout the best place to cross into Mexico, promising he'd be back by dawn. For the first time since they'd fled, Lura and Vecto were truly alone. No bullets, no orders, just silence and stars. Sitting beside the small fire, the weight of everything they'd endured and what lay ahead settled between them. "Are you scared?" Vecto asked, his voice warm in the hush of the forest. Lura considered it. "Yes," she admitted, "but not of the future. I'm afraid of what might have happened if I'd stayed. A life unlived, a love buried." She met his gaze, the flames flickering in her eyes. "What about you? Are you afraid?" "I've known fear since I was a boy," he said quietly. "Fear of soldiers, fear for my people, fear of vanishing like dust in the wind." He reached out his hand, closing over hers with surety. "But now," he added, "I fear only one thing, that I won't be worthy of what you gave up for me." "It wasn't sacrifice," she whispered. "It was choice, my choice." Her grip tightened on his hand. "The first real choice I've ever made." Vecto shifted closer, settling beside her on the log. His arm slipped around her waist, pulling her into him with quiet certainty. She leaned into the warmth of his body, her head resting against the curve of his shoulder, like it was made just for her. "In my tongue," he said softly, breath brushing her hair, "there's a word for when two rivers meet and become one. Nahaga. It means they can never part again. Together there's something stronger, something new." "Nahaga," she echoed, tasting the word. "Is that what we are, if that's what you wish?" He lifted her chin, and their eyes locked. No priest, no paper, no altar, just two hearts and the stars. "In my people's way," he said, "a man and woman choose. They walk together, and they make that vow beneath a sky that never changes." Lura's heart pounded. "How do you make such a promise?" Vecto smiled, truly smiled, and stood. "Come," he said, drawing her up. He led her away from the fire to the lake's edge, where the water mirrored the endless night sky. Stars watched silently, ancient and eternal, as two souls stood side by side, ready to walk the rest of their lives as one. Facing her beneath the vast sprawl of stars that had watched over both love and war, Vecto took Lura Vale's hands into his. His voice, deep as canyon wind, carried through the quiet night. Under these stars, witnesses to empires rising and falling, he began steady and strong. "I, Vecto of the White Mountain Apache, choose you. Lura Vale as my wife, my companion, my other self. I vow to walk beside you through every storm and sun, to share what I hunt, to guard you with my strength, and to honor the wild spirit in you, free and fierce as my own. No border, no army, no death will break this vow. We are two rivers," he said, now joined, flowing together toward the unknown. His words, bare of ornament, yet full of soul, stirred something deep in Lura. No priest, no paper, no town hall promise could ever match this kind of sacred pledge made under the open heavens. When he finished, Lura understood what she needed to do. No rehearsed speech, just the truth blooming from her heart. Beneath these same stars, she whispered, I lure a veil, choose you. Vecto as my husband, my companion, my other self. I promise to walk your path, to shoulder your burdens and share your joy. I'll face what comes with the same courage you've shown me. That old life is gone, blown away like dust. What we are now, that's what matters. Two rivers, she repeated softly, flowing as one. Vecto held her tighter, the starlight glinting in his eyes. Eyes filled with awe, with a kind of joy too fierce for words. Then he leaned in, fingers brushing her cheek, and kissed her with a quiet fire that had been waiting too long. That kiss broke the last dam between them. The longing, the months of silence and distance, it all washed away. They had battled guns, fear, prejudice, and fate. Now wrapped in blankets beside the fire, Lura rested within Vecto's arms, the glow of the flames dancing across his strong features. Tomorrow they'd face the border. Tomorrow they'd press on toward the highlands and build a life straddling two worlds. But tonight was just theirs. Sleep, Vecto murmured into her hair. Tomorrow we walk into new lands. Lura closed her eyes and let go, secure in the strength of the man beside her. What filled her thoughts wasn't the past, it was what lay ahead. This wasn't an ending, it was a beginning. Two rivers, one current, carrying them toward the sea. 3 years later, the adobe house clung to the mountainside like it had always been there, its clay walls kissed by sunsets, its beams scarred by wind and time. Around it, life bloomed, corn squash beans lined up in tidy rows. Healing herbs hugged the doorway, wildflowers tangled wherever they pleased. Inside, Lura hummed softly, while grinding corn with the matiti stone. Her rhythm was second nature, now as familiar as the piano keys she once touched back in Willow Creek. Outside the open door, the valley stretched wide, Apache and Mexican families working the land, children's laughter echoing through the dust. Hoofbeats broke the moment. She shaded her eyes, stepping outside. Her smile bloomed instantly. Vecto back from his 3-day hunt, a deer tied behind his saddle. He swung down smooth as ever, his face lighting up when he saw her. 3 years had carved changes into them both. Her skin now bronzed by the sun, her hands hardened by labor. His eyes softer, the edge of survival, worn into something steadier. But at the core, they were still the same, only stronger. Good hunt, she asked as she walked into his arms. The mountains gay, he said, holding her close. Enough to share with Naira's family. Her youngest is still sick. Lura nodded. She'd learned from the elders what herb cooled fevers, what soothed coughing. Her open heart, her willingness to give and learn, had earned her a place in a community that had every reason to keep her out. I'll make a tonic, she said, heading back inside. And I'll bring her some dried apples, too. As Vecto went to prepare the deer behind the house, Lura gathered her medicines. Life here had become a rhythm, nothing like her old life, but more fulfilling than she'd ever dared dream in that big cold house her father ruled over. There had been struggles. That first winter had been cruel, food, scarce, skills foreign, homesickness that stung like a wound. But they had endured. Together. Tensions had always lingered, as some in the community still saw only her pale skin, an echo of the soldiers who had once torn through their lands. But alongside the suspicion came unexpected joys. Lura Vale had found pride in mastering new skills, weaving, planting, speaking the blended Apache and Spanish that bound the people here together. She was no longer bound by corsets or social niceties, but could follow her own rhythm. Most of all, she'd built something fierce and lasting with Vecto, a bond deepened by trials they'd survived together. And nothing brought her more joy than the tiny bundle sleeping in the cradle near the hearth. As if sensing her thoughts, a soft cry floated through the door. Lura stepped quickly inside and found her daughter, stirring tiny fists waving in the air. At just 6 months, Elka was living proof that two worlds could indeed become one. Her skin was a warm blend of both parents, her midnight eyes reflecting Vecto's, while her delicate features mirrored Lura's. Shh, little one, Lura murmured, lifting her into her arms. Your papa's home. Shall we go greet him? Elka settled into her mother's warmth, blinking up curiously as they stepped outside. Vecto looked up from his work, a buck secured from his 3-day hunt, and smiled with a softness only a father could wear. Ah, the little eagle has awakened, he said, brushing his hands clean, before gently taking Elka into his arms. She clutched playfully at the eagle feather, tied near his temple, a symbol of honor, now not resistance. Lura watched them, her heart full. This was the same man who had fought armies and bigotry with unshakable resolve, now wholly enchanted by their child's smile. As he whispered in Apache to Elka, teaching her the language of his people, Lura knew she would one day teach her English, and the bits of Spanish she herself had picked up. Just then, a rider appeared on the trail leading to their home. It was Quill, one of the younger men who often made the supply runs to town. Vecto Lura, he called as he dismounted, face alight with urgency. A letter from the north. Lura's heart skipped. In 3 years, not a word had come from Willow Creek from the family she had left behind. She and Vecto exchanged a look heavy with unspoken questions as Quill pulled a battered envelope from his saddlebag. The American at the trading post insisted it reach you, Quill explained. Said it came from a man who searched long and hard to find you. Vecto's stance shifted subtly, tension returning to his shoulders. What man? He didn't stay, Quill said with a shrug. Dropped the letter and rode south. After Quill declined their offer of food, saying his mother was expecting him. Lura stood silently with the envelope in hand. The handwriting was unmistakable. Corvin Vale's precise scrawl, unchanged by time. Do you want to read it alone? Vecto asked gently. Still holding Elka, who had drifted off against his chest. Lura shook her head. No. Whatever's in it, we face it together. They sat on the bench outside, the same one where they'd watched countless sunsets. With a trembling hand, she broke the seal and unfolded the single sheet. My dearest daughter, I pray this letter reaches you safe and well, though I know I don't deserve a reply after what's passed between us. For 3 years I've lived with the shame of my failings as a father, a man of faith, and someone who claimed to stand on principle. Your mother Irelda passed last winter in her sleep. Her last clear words were of you asking if there'd been news. All I could say was the truth, that I'd driven away, the only child I had, blinded by stubborn pride. Willow Creek has changed. The railroad came. New faces, new ideas. Dastan Crow was transferred east shortly after you left. Rumor has it someone questioned his role in the reservation raid. The truth about the Henderson killings came out. It was rustlers from the south hiding their crimes in the chaos. I've sold the store. I couldn't keep up with it anymore. The new owner, Bragg, treats both Apache and white folk with decency. There's a new Indian agent here now. One with a heart unlike the last. I'm not asking forgiveness. Some bridges stay burned. But your courage and the strength of the man you chose forced many of us to look in the mirror. You cast a stone that still sends ripples. The bearer of this letter knows. Only to deliver it, not to track you down. Your safety comes first. But if ever you choose, there's still room in my life and my home for you, for both of you, for any child you've brought into this world. With regret and hope, your father, Corvin Vale. Lura read it twice. Then in silence she handed it to Vecto. While he read, she cradled their sleeping daughter, her heart full of wonder. This little girl, this beautiful child, was proof that what others claimed couldn't exist had not only survived, but thrived. When Vecto finished, he folded the letter and gave it back without a word. Your father's changed. Vecto said, his voice even and thoughtful. Seems that way. Lura replied, her eyes drifting toward the valley where the late light painted golden streaks across the adobe homes and sun-kissed gardens of their small desert community. I never thought I'd hear from him again. Do you want to go back? There was no pressure in his voice, no fear, only the unwavering support he'd always offered her through every risk, every unknown. Lura turned the question over slowly, weighing its weight with care. Going back to Willow Creek would mean access to schools, for Elka to doctors and medicine beyond herbs and prayers. It would offer a second chance with her only remaining parent, a path to mend old wounds, carved by silence and distance. But it would also mean stepping back into a world ruled by invisible fences, lines drawn by skin blood and legacy. It would mean raising their daughter in a place where curious glances could turn cruel, and whispered judgment would cling like dust. "No," she said at last, a quiet strength anchoring her words. "My home is here with you, with Elka, with what we've built together." She lifted her gaze to him, and there it was in his eyes, steadfast peace, rooted deep like mesquite. "But maybe someday we'll visit," she added. "Let him meet the granddaughter he never knew. Let him see what love really looks like." Vecto's hand found hers, their fingers interlacing across the weathered benchwood. "When Elka's older, when the time feels right." They sat in gentle stillness as the sun drifted behind the peaks, draping their home in golden dusk. Elka stirred lightly. Against Lura's chest, her tiny face wrinkling before sleep reclaimed her. "He was right about one thing," Lura whispered. "What's that ripples from a stone?" She smiled, remembering the girl she once was sitting proper behind a counter, too scared to speak her truth. "I never realized running away could mean running towards something greater." Vecto traced circles on her hand with his thumb, just like he had back at the creek that first electric moment when silence had cracked between them and possibility poured through. "The Apache say the trail is made by walking it. And we've made quite a trail, haven't we?" She leaned into him, resting her head against his shoulder, where strength and calm had always lived. "And we'll keep making it," he murmured, step by step, day by day. As twilight settled over the ridges, they stayed seated. One small family surrounded by echoes of the past and dreams of the future. The lines that once divided them, borders, blood names, had all blurred beneath the weight of love's truth. "No border, no army, no death can keep me," he had once vowed. "I will return for your hand." And he had. And she had taken it. Together they'd walked through storms and sunrises, through heartbreak and healing, into the quiet miracle of ordinary days that shaped a life worth living. They hadn't reached the end of their tale, only its truest beginning. In the soft hush of nightfall, as the first stars blinked into the vast sky above, Lura felt something deeper than joy, something whole. This is what it means to choose with your whole heart. This is what it means to live free. Two rivers joined as one, flowing toward an open horizon. Dear listener, as you walk through Lura's journey, maybe you felt a tug at your own heart. She wasn't just a young woman who followed love. She was all of us. At some point, we all face a crossroads: stay or go, stay silent or speak up, hold others, or finally hold ourselves. And as time moves on, we learn there's no expiration date for choosing differently, no age limit on freedom, dignity, love. Lura left behind everything she knew and found herself. So have you. Through quiet courage, through heartbreak and grace, you've shed old skins, old fears, and found strength in return. Because truthfully, it isn't youth that gives life its meaning. It's tenderness. It's wisdom. It's the peace that only comes from having wept and hoped and loved with your whole soul. Whether you're in your 30s, 60s, or beyond, please remember this: it's not too late. Not for softness, not for joy, not for love. Tonight, may your body rest. But more importantly, may your spirit feel seen and safe. With gratitude, Wild West. Lone Hearts like. If this story stirred something deep, comment. Share your truth. We're listening. Subscribe. Hit that bell so you never miss what comes next. Share, because stories like this deserve to travel far. One more unforgettable story is waiting at the end of this video. Click and ride into the next journey. All stories are created for entertainment purposes and may include fictional elements or dramatized interpretations inspired by historical settings. We use AI tools, voiceover visuals, scripts as creative assistants. However, all content is reviewed, refined, and edited by humans to ensure emotional authenticity and storytelling quality. We fully comply with YouTube's policies regarding AI-generated content and do not use any deep-fake techniques or misleading recreations of real individuals. All visuals and supporting materials are properly licensed. Sharing, re-uploading, modifying, or distributing any part of this content in any form requires written permission. We appreciate your support and respect for original creative work.